Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with security expert James Demeo, the author of the book, What's Your Plan? A Guide to Keeping Your Family Safe in Emergency Situations, we're going to talk about recent shootings near or inside stores that are putting shoppers on edge. James, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
You know, when you hear about a shooting inside a store or in a shopping area, I think everybody's minds right now immediately go to, oh, it's a mass shooting, like the one we had on the Greenway here in Raleigh in October. And, you know, even if one person is targeting another person, this causes so much anxiety because obviously anybody in that area can be hit. We just saw at North Hills Shopping Center this week, there was a shooting where one person was struck. It was right near the movie theater, right near the Christmas tree. It was packed with holiday shoppers. I mean, what should people take away when they hear about something like this?
Sure. Tough situations, obviously coming out of the worst pandemic in 100 years. We're getting back into public spaces, and unfortunately, these types of difficult situations are occurring day in and day out, not only here in Raleigh, but throughout the country. So certainly we want to learn our lessons as to what's happening, and we want to be empowered on knowing what to do when faced with these difficult situations.
You know, recently, again, just in the last few days, there was the shooting at the Walmart in Virginia, where a manager opened fire on his employees, killing 6 people, wounding 2 others. Then on Black Friday, a man was shot at a Walmart here in North Carolina in Lumberton, and 2 people were shot at the Greenville Mall near ECU. So, you know, are there any things that shoppers can do to better protect themselves?
Sure. It's a great question, obviously. Real close to home, holiday season, as you mentioned, and just shoppers having a mindset of paying attention to the world around them at all times and kind of assessing where they are and knowing where they are. And that starts with having a conversation with their family before they actually leave their house, or at least on the way to the mall. And that would include just knowing exactly what their plan would be in the event they were faced with one of these unthinkable situations. So we see from time to time the fear factor rears its ugly head, but what can families do collectively, individually, to, again, get out in front of these challenges that we're seeing throughout society today?
So give me some examples of what people can do.
Well, again, as I've mentioned, start the conversation. Just go around the table at home and say, you know, we're going to the mall, and ultimately, where are we going to be? Once we get there, we know where the vehicle is parked. We all have fully charged cell phones. We've even taken the time to look at the website for the manager for the mall itself to know exactly when it's opening, when it's closing. When we go in, is there a guest services kiosk when we first walk in? And we can go up to those folks that work behind the counter and just introduce ourselves and ask questions. But while that's happening, to pay attention to not only how we got in the mall, but how we're going to get out of the mall in the event we're faced with one of these unthinkable situations.
And I guess that's really an important part because I think, you know, I remember telling my kids when they were teenagers or even adolescents going to the mall, you know, if you hear something and it makes you afraid, you need to run and you need to hide. And I think that's kind of a universal thought in most of these situations. But, you know, we never think it's going to happen to us.
Nobody really wants to think that they're going to face the unimaginable. I think about the Vegas shooter with Jason Aldean up on the stage, and he was surrounded by all the gunshots, and his crew thought it was something related to the speakers. Well, in fact, as we know, several years later, that wasn't the case. So nobody really wants to think that the unthinkable is happening. So what do we do collectively to understand and process that in real time? And that starts with having a pre-planned response. What would you do when faced with these types of situations? And again, I really espouse the notion of being empowered and not fearful. And just because the crowd is running out a certain exit doesn't necessarily mean they're leading you to safety. And if something unthinkable is happening, law enforcement is responding. Of course, if they're at the scene, that's different, but it will take a few minutes for them to get there. So what's your plan in terms of surviving those, you know, few difficult moments before they arrive on scene?
What inspired you to write your book?
You know, I appreciate that question. You know, love North Carolina, all the great things about, you know, living here. We've been here 6 years now, and we were visiting a mall here in the area back in 2017, and we were up on the second floor, And all of a sudden the lights went out. And at the time, my son Aiden, he's 18 now, but at the time he was a few years younger, had said something to me that was rather profound. And that really was the impetus for me on creating a family plan. So we went home that night and we sat down at the table and we went around and we discussed what we would do if we were faced with an unthinkable situation. So being in security over 32 years and law enforcement 21 years, when your family member says something to you that really makes you stop in your tracks and say, I need to do something about this. I need to not only share this information with my family, but also share it with other families. That really was the impetus, the drive, the motivation for me to write this book. And it was certainly a lot of hard work. I surrounded myself with some really smart people. It became a bestseller, which I didn't plan on, but ultimately that was the case. And having these conversations 5-6 years later, unfortunately, we're seeing the rash of active shooters since 2017. It seems like it happens every day on the news, and we live in such a 24/7, 365 society that we become sometimes desensitized, or we want to block things out, and ultimately we can't do that if we want to deal with these types of situations.
Absolutely. We will be right back after the break with more from James Demeo on how violence in shopping areas could impact shoppers' behavior. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with James Demeo about recent shootings in shopping areas. James, we mentioned in the first half there have been shootings in North Carolina at shopping areas, several shootings since Friday. What kind of an impact do you think this has on people in terms of whether they feel safe, whether they're anxious? This is a very busy time of year for people to be in shopping areas.
It is. You're right. It is a busy time of year, and certainly the anxiety's out there. As I've mentioned, we're coming out of the pandemic or getting back into public spaces. We've had a rash of recent shootings. So what do we do? Do we succumb to the fear factor, or we actually do something about it? Do we create kind of a pre-planned mindset on how to survive unthinkable situations? And it's certainly important to maintain our situational awareness to the world around us at all times. And by doing that, that creates a sense of empowerment that helps us get out in front of these challenges.
I know you mentioned a safe word. What is that about, having that with your family?
And again, your family may have a different, unique code word than mine, but it's good to not only say that we're going to meet at Starbucks or back at the car, but have that predetermined location or where you would meet. In the event something happened, have a certain word that is unique to your family. But again, that's something that during the discussion stages, that helps you kind of feel stronger about things, feel more empowered, that you're taking the time to really analyze up front as opposed to being reactive and then following that fear factor, as I've mentioned.
So in other words, you might text this word to a family member or even say it, and they would know that there was a dangerous situation occurring.
That's correct. It could be either or both.
Clearly there's an option for people to shop online, but again, around the holidays, people want to go somewhere like North Hills that are surrounded with Christmas decorations and holiday spirit and holiday music. And North Hills, obviously in a very difficult situation, released a statement saying they're working with police, they are communicating with their tenants, and they said, quote, "The security of our guests, residents, and tenants is our top priority." So what advice, I know you work with companies in these situations, what advice do you give shopping centers, stores, retail areas about how to make people feel safe?
Sure. So that's the right message, crisis communication, but trust and transparency and getting out in front and taking ownership that there are challenges. And certainly if you look at Kane or North Hills or any of these public spaces, they are beautiful areas as you've described. Christmas trees, holiday shopping, it's the spaces that we want to be in. And certainly we don't want to be fearful. We want to get back out in society and we want to enjoy these spaces. The bad actors want us to stay home. They want us to be afraid, and we have to push past that. So in terms of some of the conversations that I have, I talk a lot about risk assessments. I talk about training for security staff. I talk about the communications between law enforcement, in this case the Raleigh PD, and the entity that oversees that shopping district. But those communications have to occur proactively. It's also important for everyone, everyday citizens, to look around, pay attention to the mantras of see something, say something, as you mentioned, run, hide, fight. But knowing what to do, having that pre-planned response is key during these most difficult times.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about this off mic, but I think it's hard because people will see something and then they second guess themselves. and they go, well, am I just overreacting? Maybe this isn't a big deal. But the see something, say something thing is really important in terms of safety and security.
It is, and everything's the real thing until proven otherwise. That's what I learned in 21 years of law enforcement, and that's the message I share today, that we don't want to think the unthinkable is actually happening, but it's better to let the authorities know so that they can vet it and prove otherwise. And so nobody wants to be, thinking later on, I should have said something, as opposed to, well, I'm listening to this podcast, now I'm actually going to do something about it and let somebody know.
I've heard it said so many times in the past few weeks, especially since the Raleigh Greenway tragedy that took 5 lives, that, we're not safe anymore, anywhere. You mentioned all you have to do is wake up and look at the news every morning, and there's another shooting in a public space. And it feels like a sad commentary on the state of the world right now. And you mentioned this, but, how do we get people to understand that, they can't be paralyzed by fear, and that they just need to be wise and aware?
Wise and aware, and not letting the fear factor overrule things. These are difficult times, again, coming out of the pandemic, want to get back into spaces. We're dealing with geopolitical divisiveness. We're dealing with inflationary, situations. But ultimately, the glass is half full. And I'm an optimist. I think better times are ahead of us. We don't want to succumb to the bad actors who are trying to instill fear. We have to be cognizant that these things are happening, and we need to do something about them. We need to be more aware. We need to let the authorities know that things are happening. But certainly we need to come forward and share that information in a timely manner.
And unfortunately, people do take advantage of situations, public spaces, where they know a lot of people are going to be because they will get the most attention. But again, it's the holiday season. People want to be out there. They want to be shopping. They want to be sharing that with their friends and family.
Yeah, you're right. But ultimately, we have to get past that, because that's exactly what they're trying to do, is instill fear. And certainly working together, public-private partnerships, as I've mentioned, but citizens coming forward, sharing information, and as I've mentioned, creating that plan, that unique code word, the fully charged cell phones, knowing where the vehicle is parked. If you're at the mall, make sure that there's lights by your vehicle. And when you're leaving the mall, to look around you to make sure that no one's following you. And if they are, look around, because usually the bad actors are looking at you, and obviously you could potentially identify someone before you're a victim of a crime.
One of the things that is kind of trending on social media is they take professional people and say, what would you never do? And so I'm just curious, is there a place that you would never go or would never take your family as a security expert? I mean, a concert, a ball game, a crowded, mall. Is there something that you would stay away from?
I try not to have that mindset, because not only as a parent, a husband, but also a security leader, I don't want to be fearful in a world that is distracted and desensitized. But at the same time, we shouldn't be afraid to go anywhere. We should be empowered. And that starts with having that conversation and creating that pre-planned response. And if we can get past that fear factor, good things will happen, obviously. But there's really no place that I would feel unsafe, as long as I took the time to have that conversation with my family, with my loved ones, and to share that information, as we're doing with this podcast, to everyone that's listening, the importance of not being fearful during difficult times.
James, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. I really appreciate it. This has been the WRAL Daily Download, a production of WRAL News. Check out my 2 true crime podcasts. What Remains focuses on solving cold cases with forensic science. Follow the Truth is about the murder of Michael Jordan's father in North Carolina in 1993. Find What Remains and follow the Truth in your podcast app.